Let's bring in a panel now of political strategists here with me in Canberra, Grahame Morris, and in Sydney, Bruce Hawker. Grahame, first to you. This is, well, it's a bit of a nightmare for Tony Abbott. The documents we've seen revealed today refer to 2009. Kevin Rudd was Prime Minister at the time when this apparent attempt to tap President Yudhoyono's phone was going on. But it's now Tony Abbott who has to deal with it. It is going to strain the relationship when he's trying to make it better to deal with a number of things, including asylum seekers.
Yeah, well, look, it's a dreadful and an unfortunate leak, and it's embarrassing. You know, and one would think that the Indonesians are quite entitled to growl at somebody. But I suspect, having growled, they will have a look at the relationship and say, well, you know, it is true that most countries gather in intelligence and information, and on one side, you know, it's not good. On the other side, it's really quite funny. You know, you can imagine, you know, if it was to happen, we'd have our own people, and there's machines listening, and somebody, you know, maybe an Indonesian official, and saying on the telephone, saying, "What's the plan tonight?" And the person says, "Also ayam." And everyone scratches around plan tonight, and it actually is chicken noodle soup. You know, there is a lot of that sort of stuff that happens in intelligence gathering that's a complete blinking waste of time.
I'm sure there's a lot of mundane stuff that does get monitored in all of this. But Bruce Hawker, what do you make of this? Is it going to, do you think, further strain the relationship, or will this just be a blip and everyone accepts that this stuff goes on?
Look, I think they probably do accept that this sort of thing goes on. I've always assumed it does, and I think most people do. But of course, when you get sprung, like Australia has been as a result of Edward Snowden, then it's very embarrassing. On the other hand, the relationship with Indonesia is incredibly important, and I think the Indonesians see their relationship with Australia as very important. And I would expect that they will, after some very stern and angry words about it, move on reasonably quickly to sort it out and to get beyond it. But it's just yet another really unfortunate interruption to what has been a pretty good relationship with the Indonesians over recent years.
Look, we know that Tony Abbott is trying to mend fences over concerns in Indonesia over his asylum seeker policy. We've seen him over the weekend focusing on the asylum seeker policy in Sri Lanka as well, where he was at the Commonwealth Leaders meeting. Grahame, it was interesting, a very different tone from the Australian Prime Minister to that of the British Prime Minister when it comes to the human rights issues in Sri Lanka. What do you think this tells us about how Tony Abbott is going to tread on the international stage when it comes to allegations of human rights abuses?
Well, I think it's more the other way. I think it shows how Tony Abbott works, and that somebody says, here's a problem, and then his problem at the moment is boats and illegal migrants, and whether or not they're, you know, economic refugees. And he focuses on it, and he throws resources at it, and he does what has to be done. You know, the English Prime Minister, you know, how many Sri Lankans have gone from Sri Lanka to Dover? None.
Well, apparently,
we're the one with the problem.
Apparently, there is the Tamil population in the UK.
Yeah, but
the suggestion being that he's playing to the crowd.
They didn't come by boat.
No, that's true. But
you know, it is different. But you know, I even thought, you know, another example of how Tony Abbott operates is here's the problem. What is one part of the solution? Patrol boats. We have patrol boats, and you know, he's the sort of bloke who focuses and focuses. And that's how he works.
But should he have spoken up more about the problem in Sri Lanka for the Tamil minority?
Oh, look, there's a time and a place. You know, I'm sure there are various times when our people will say to the Sri Lankans, look, there are some areas where you've got to lift your game. But at the moment, you know, what is important for our game is different to that one. And yeah, look, a lot of people will say, well, hang on, you can chew gum and walk at the same time. But you know, we have different interests at the moment, and our interests require working with the Sri Lankans, and if we can all lift our game, maybe the Tamils would be better off too.
Bruce, did you have any issue, any concern at all with how Tony Abbott dealt with this matter in Sri Lanka?
Well, it turns out there is a problem in Sri Lanka after all, and if that's the case, he doesn't want to rile the Sri Lankans, and so what's he do? He does what he's been doing constantly in recent weeks, and that's just throw a blanket over it, say nothing, do nothing, don't let the public know what he's really saying about anything. I just think it's further indication of his approach to very important issues. Now, he should be objecting strenuously to the Sri Lankan government about their treatment, their human rights abuses over many years in that country. There is a significant Tamil population in Australia that wants to hear about that as well. Just as Prime Minister Harper and Prime Minister Singh in India have boycotted those Chogam activities because of the seriousness of what happened in that country. No, I don't think it's good at all. I think it just shows us kowtowing to them in a way that's very unedifying, really unedifying. I think he should be much stronger in his response.
I want to turn to a couple of matters back home. This week, we're no doubt going to see another fierce debate over the debt ceiling. Senate estimates is on this week, which means the head of Treasury, in particular, will be there in front of the Senate committee tomorrow, answering questions on this. The government want to increase the debt ceiling to $500 billion, and Labor's saying no, only $400 will do. The Greens seem a bit more open to being convinced by the Treasury Secretary on this. Where is this going to end up, Grahame? It seems we're going to see a compromise at some point. Do you think both sides are going to give? What's going to happen?
Well, you'd think there'd have to be some sort of a compromise, but really it does depend on what the head of Treasury says on Wednesday and Thursday at the Estimates Committee, and all the politicians will be watching. Look,
and this is hard to predict too, because don't forget Martin Parkinson is leaving pretty soon.
Yeah, indeed. But, we have a ceiling at the moment which says $300 billion. And we know that it's blown out a lot since then. And then Treasury has been saying, on top of whatever it is, we need another $60 billion. So you're over the 400 that Labor Party wants already. Now, should it be 420, 450, 500? I don't know. Martin Parkinson will tell us. But he's sitting in a bit of a hot seat.
Well, he is. The point I'm making, though, he's really under no obligation to help out the government, is he? Given that
probably not.
One of the first announcements when they won the election was that Martin Parkinson's going.
Yeah, I know Martin. No, he's a pro, and the figure he gives will be the best estimate of Treasury. But I suspect it's more than 400 million. In which case there will be some wheeling and dealing.
Yeah, Bruce, on that wheeling and dealing, do you think both sides should give a little here? No one wants to see any sort of shutdown.
Yeah, I think probably that it would be the sensible approach to take, but I don't think the opposition's being unreasonable in saying, show us the numbers. It's certainly very different from the numbers that were around when they were in government, and that's been the point that the Shadow Treasurer, Chris Bowen's been making all along. Look, happy to go to 400 million, but why go beyond that without having some demonstration of why we need that? And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing for the opposition to be asking for.
Just finally, the seat of Griffith, Kevin Rudd, is leaving, although as of right now, it's 4:45 here in Canberra. He hasn't officially handed in his resignation letter to the Speaker. That means by the close of business today, if he hasn't done that, the by-election won't be this year. It'll have to be next year, presumably sometime in late February. Bill Glasson has confirmed that he is going to run again as the LNP candidate. Well, Bruce, first to you. Do you think it's a safe bet that Bill Glasson will win the seat?
No, it's not. I think he'll definitely be the Liberal Party candidate, though. I think when you vacate the seat, the government's going to have been in power for a period of time. They haven't had too much of a honeymoon, and as I've said before, there are significant local issues at play in Griffith where people can vent their spleen if they want to against the government for not supporting a cross-river tunnel for a rail, for supporting an extension of a parallel runway at Brisbane Airport, which will go over the seat of Griffith. There are all sorts of things that people can run on at a local level, which could change the complexion of that seat completely. But what I do know is that they certainly won't be taking it for granted.
All right, Grahame, what do you reckon?
Well, I think Dr. Glasson's a fantastic candidate to have in a by-election. But look, I've ran all these blinking by-elections: Wannon, Corangamite, Moreton, Bruce, Adelaide, Port Adelaide. The average swing in those days, and I think it's still the same, against the government is about 2.5%, 3%. I'm not quite sure what it is now, but it's about 2.5%, 3% against the government. And these by-elections are really nasty things for opposition leaders. And just imagine if the average is 2.5%, 3%, you know, what happens? What happens if Bill Glasson does win? What does that mean for the psyche of the Labor Party? I don't know. But by jingoes, I'd love to have had a candidate like him in some of the by-elections I've run. He's a beauty.
I'm sure that's right. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.